"You are too old," said the heartless man. She was lost on the mountain until she finds her true love. The November rain hammered against the windows of the small apartment in Barcelona's Gothic quarter, each drop a reminder of Elena Morales' solitude. She sat hunched over her sewing table, squinting in the dim candlelight as her needle pierced through layers of silk. At 38, her fingers still moved with practiced precision, though they ached more than they used to. 5 years. 5 years since the accident at the port had taken Antonio from her. 5 years of waking up to empty rooms and going to bed with only the sound of her own breathing. The seamstress work kept food on her table, but it couldn't fill the void that had settled into her bones, like the Barcelona dampness. Elena paused, pressing her palm against the small of her back. The dress she was working on belonged to Señora Martinez, a woman 10 years younger who was already expecting her third child. Elena forced herself to smile when her customers spoke of their families, their husbands, their full lives. But alone in her apartment, the smile always faded. She set down her needle and reached for the newspaper she'd bought that morning. It was a luxury she rarely allowed herself, but the vendor had been particularly insistent. "Something interesting in there today, Señora Morales," he'd said with a knowing wink. Elena unfolded the pages carefully, her eyes scanning the usual news, politics, trade reports, society announcements. Then she saw it, in the classified section, a simple advertisement that made her heart suddenly beat faster. "Respected merchant seeks honorable woman for matrimony. Established business in Navaredonda, province of Avila. A comfortable life in the mountains awaits the right companion. Correspondence welcome. Don Sebastian Ruiz." Her hands trembled slightly as she reread the words. Mountains, a new life, a purpose beyond the endless lonely nights, and the pity in her neighbor's eyes. Eleanor had heard of such arrangements, widows and spinsters finding second chances through correspondence. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but romance hadn't saved her from this suffocating loneliness. Before she could talk herself out of it, Eleanor pulled out her writing paper. The words flowed more easily than she'd expected. She wrote honestly about herself, a widow, a skilled seamstress, a woman who'd known love and loss and was brave enough to seek it again. She mentioned her age, 38, though her hand hesitated over the number. But dishonesty was not in her nature. She sealed the letter before dawn, and by the time the rain stopped, it was already on its way to the mountains. Elena returned to her sewing, but for the first time in years, she found herself humming. Hope, she discovered, was a dangerous and beautiful thing. 3 weeks later, a response arrived. The handwriting was strong and confident, the words warm and reassuring. Don Sebastian wrote of his textile shop, of the beauty of the Sierra de Gredos, of loneliness that mirrored her own. He wanted companionship, conversation, someone to share the mountain sunsets with. He spoke of honor and respect, of building a life together. Elena's hands shook as she read his words again and again. Could this be real? Could happiness find her again in such an unexpected way? She wrote back immediately, and thus began a correspondence that would change everything. But as she sealed that second letter with trembling hands, Eleanor couldn't know that the hope blooming in her chest would soon face its darkest winter, and that her true spring was waiting where she least expected it. December brought a chill to Barcelona, but Elena barely noticed the cold. Every morning she would rush to check for mail before starting her work, and twice a week, like clockwork, a letter would arrive bearing the mountain postmark. Don Sebastian's letters painted vivid pictures of a life Elena had never imagined. He described the morning mist rolling through the valleys, the ancient stone buildings of Navaredonda, the weekly market where he sold fine fabrics brought from Madrid and Salamanca. He wrote of winter evenings by the fire, of the silence of snow falling on pine forests, of a life simple but dignified. "There is a peace in these mountains, Elena," one letter read, "that I believe you would cherish. The days are honest here, the work is real, and a man knows the value of genuine companionship when the winters are long and the nights longer still." Eleanor responded with equal honesty, telling him of her life as a seamstress, of the Barcelona streets she knew by heart, of books she'd read and dreams she'd tucked away. She wrote of Antonio, not hiding her past, but not dwelling on it either. She wrote of her desire for purpose, for family, for a home that felt full instead of hollow. "I am not a young girl with naive expectations," she wrote in January. "I have lived enough to know that true partnership is built on respect and shared values, not just passion. I seek a companion who understands that life's beauty often lies in its quiet moments." The letters grew warmer as winter deepened. Sebastian wrote of his shop, of how a woman's touch could transform the space, of how lonely it felt to eat dinner alone every night. He spoke of wanting someone educated and refined to help manage the accounts, to entertain the occasional guests from the city, to bring grace to his household. Elena found herself daydreaming between stitches. She imagined the mountain air, so different from Barcelona's salt-tinged breeze. She pictured the shop, neat shelves lined with fabrics, the satisfaction of building something together. Most of all, she imagined not being alone anymore. Her neighbor, Señora Flores, caught her smiling one morning. "You look different, Elena. Lighter somehow." Elena hesitated, then showed her the latest letter. Señora Flores read it carefully, her expression skeptical. "The mountains are far, child, and you've never met this man. What if he's not what he seems? What if he is?" Elena countered softly. "What if I let fear keep me from a chance at happiness? I can't live the rest of my life in this apartment, sewing other women's wedding dresses and baptism gowns, Señora. I can't." The older woman's face softened. She touched Elena's cheek gently. "Then go, mija, but go with your eyes open." By February, the decision was made. Don Sebastian had formally proposed through correspondence, and Elena had accepted. The arrangements were set. She would travel to Navaredonda in early March, before the spring rains made the mountain roads impassable. They would marry in the village church, with witnesses from the community. A new life awaited. Elena spent her final weeks in Barcelona, settling her affairs. She sold most of her furniture, keeping only her sewing kit and a few precious belongings that had been Antonio's. She said goodbye to her customers, to Señora Flores, who cried despite herself, to the narrow streets that had been her whole world. The night before her departure, Elena sat in her empty apartment one last time. The walls echoed with memories, Antonio's laugh, their quiet dinners, the news that they would never have children, the telegram about the accident. But those echoes were fading now, making room for something new. She pulled out Sebastian's most recent letter, reading it by candlelight. "I await your arrival with great anticipation, Elena. Together, we will build a good life. I promise you that." Elena folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her traveling bag. Tomorrow she would board the coach to Avila, then take another to Navaredonda. Tomorrow, her new life would begin. As she blew out the candle, Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude and hope into the darkness. She had no idea that the promise in that letter would shatter like ice in her hands, or that the real promise of her future was still waiting, unwritten, in the mountains ahead. The coach departed Barcelona at dawn, and Elena watched through the dusty window as the city slowly disappeared behind her. The Mediterranean Sea glinted in the early morning light, then faded as the road turned inland toward the mountains. There were 6 other passengers in the cramped coach: a merchant returning to Zaragoza, 2 priests heading to a monastery, a young couple speaking in hushed, excited tones about their first visit to Madrid, and an elderly woman who clutched a basket of bread and kept dozing off against Elena's shoulder. The journey would take 3 days, with stops in small towns along the way. Elena had brought bread, cheese, and dried fruit, rationing it carefully. The coins sewn into the lining of her coat represented everything she had left in the world, barely enough for emergencies, certainly not enough to return to Barcelona if things went wrong. But things wouldn't go wrong. She touched Sebastian's letters in her bag for reassurance. They had corresponded for months. He knew her age, her circumstances, her character. He had chosen her, and she had chosen him. This was fate, destiny, a second chance that Providence had graciously provided. The landscape transformed as they traveled. The coastal plains gave way to rolling hills, then to steeper terrain as they approached the central plateau. On the second day, Elena caught her first glimpse of the Sierra de Gredos in the distance, a jagged line of peaks still capped with snow despite the early March warmth in the valleys below. "First time in the mountains?" the merchant asked, noticing her awed expression. "Yes," Elena admitted. "I've lived my whole life by the sea. The mountains are different," he said, his tone respectful. "Beautiful but harsh. The people there are hardy folk. They have to be. Winter comes early and stays late in the high villages." Elena nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. "I'm prepared for a different life. Going to family? Going to be married?" The merchant's eyebrows rose, but he was too polite to pry further. The elderly woman, however, had no such compunctions. "Married? To a mountain man? How did you meet?" "Through letters," Elena said simply. "He's a merchant in Navaredonda, a respected man of business." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "Ah, One of those arrangements. Well, I've seen them work out beautifully, and I've seen them end in tears. The trick is whether both parties are honest in their expectations. We've been very honest with each other, Elena assured her, though her stomach tightened slightly. By the third day, the coach had climbed into the foothills. The air grew thinner, crisper, scented with pine and granite. Snow appeared along the roadside, not the dirty slush of city winters, but pristine white that made everything seem cleaner, newer. Eleanor pressed her face to the cold window, drinking in the sight. The villages they passed became smaller, more isolated. Stone houses huddled together against the elements, smoke rising from chimneys, children in wool coats running between buildings. Elena saw women washing clothes in freezing streams, men herding goats, a world so far removed from Barcelona's bustle, it might as well have been a different country. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the coach finally began its descent into a valley. The driver called out, "Navaredonda ahead! Last stop!" Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She smoothed her traveling dress, touched her hair to make sure it was still neat under her bonnet. This was it. After months of letters, of hoping and planning, she would finally meet Don Sebastian. She would finally begin her new life. The village appeared gradually. First a church steeple, then a cluster of buildings around a central square, all built from the same grey-brown stone as the mountains themselves. Smoke rose from chimneys into the clear, cold air. Elena could see a few people moving about despite the late hour, bundled against the chill. The coach lurched to a stop in the square. The driver jumped down to help passengers with their luggage. Elena accepted his hand, her legs stiff from 3 days of travel, and stepped onto the cobblestones of her new home. The square was quiet in the fading light. A few locals glanced at the coach with mild curiosity before returning to their business. Elena scanned the buildings, looking for the textile shop Sebastian had described, looking for the man himself, and then she saw him, standing in the doorway of a shop across the square, a tall figure in a dark coat. Even from a distance, she could feel his eyes on her, assessing, evaluating. Eleanor lifted her chin, gathered her courage, and walked toward her future with determined steps. But with each step across that cold stone square, she couldn't shake the sudden chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air, a premonition that whispered softly in her bones that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Don Sebastian Ruiz was a handsome man. Elena noticed this first as she approached. The strong jaw, the thick dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples, the expensive cut of his coat. He stood in the doorway of his shop with his arms crossed, and his eyes tracked her movement across the square with an expression she couldn't quite read. She stopped a few feet away, suddenly uncertain. "Don Sebastian? Señora Morales." His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth that had filled his letters. His eyes moved over her face, her figure, lingering on the grey strands visible at her temples where her bonnet had shifted during travel. His mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "The journey was long, but I'm here now," Elena said, trying to smile despite the ice forming in her stomach. "Your letters made the miles pass more easily. It's wonderful to finally—" "How old are you?" he interrupted, his tone sharp. Elena blinked. I told you in my first letter, 38. I was very clear about—" "You wrote that you were a widow." His words came out clipped, accusatory. "How you didn't mention that you were—" He gestured vaguely at her, letting the sentence hang unfinished in the cold air. "That I was what?" Eleanor's voice came out smaller than she intended. Sebastian glanced around the square, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation happening in public. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but not its coldness. "That you were past your prime, Señora. That you were older. The way you wrote, I naturally assumed—" The words hit Elena like physical blows. She felt her face flush hot despite the freezing air. "I was completely honest about my age. My first letter stated clearly. Perhaps I misread." His tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. "Or perhaps the years have been less kind than your letters suggested. I was expecting—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was expecting someone who could still give me children, Señora. Sons to carry on my business. A woman who could be a proper wife in all ways." The implication hung between them, ugly and cruel. Eleanor felt something inside her crack, not clean like ice, but jagged like stone. "We corresponded for months," she said, her voice shaking now. "You wrote of companionship, of partnership, of—" "I wrote what was appropriate for courtship letters," Sebastian said with brutal frankness. "I assumed certain things about the woman who would respond. I see now I assumed incorrectly. You asked me to come here. Elena heard the desperation creeping into her voice and hated herself for it. I sold everything I owned. I traveled 3 days to... That was your choice, Senora. Sebastian's face had closed off entirely now, smooth and cold as the shop window behind him. I made no binding promises. We exchanged letters. Nothing more. Surely you understand that a man of my position must consider his future carefully. I need a wife who can provide heirs, manage a household for many years to come. You are... Again, that dismissive gesture. You are simply not suitable. The square seemed to tilt around Elena. She gripped the handle of her small suitcase so tightly her knuckles went white. So what am I supposed to do? I have no money to return. I know no one here. You cannot simply... There's an inn across the square. Sebastian pulled out his coin purse, extracting several bills, with the air of a man paying off an unfortunate debt. This should cover a few nights and coach fare back to wherever you came from. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but surely you can see that continuing with this arrangement would be a mistake for both of us. He held out the money. Elena stared at it, at his closed face, at the complete absence of guilt or compassion in his eyes. The letters, all those beautiful words about companionship and partnership and building a life together, meant nothing. She meant nothing. She was simply too old, too worn, too visibly marked by time and hardship to be what he wanted. Pride warred with desperate pragmatism. She needed that money. But taking it felt like accepting his cruel assessment, like agreeing that she was worth nothing more than a prostitute, might be after a disappointing encounter. Keep your money, Elena said quietly, though her voice shook. I don't want anything from you. Sebastian's expression flickered with something, surprise perhaps, or annoyance. Don't be foolish, Senora. How will you... I will manage. Elena lifted her chin, meeting his eyes directly. I have managed many difficult things in my life, Don Sebastian. I will manage this as well. She turned away before he could respond, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall, before her shaking legs could betray her and send her collapsing onto the cold cobblestones. She heard him call after her once, half-hearted, then the firm sound of his shop door closing. Eleanor walked blindly across the square, past the curious stares of villagers who had witnessed the exchange, past the inn with its warm lights that might as well have been on the moon for all the good they did her. She kept walking until she reached the church at the far end of the square, its stone walls ancient and solid and indifferent to human suffering. There, in the shadows of the church portico, Elena finally set down her suitcase. Her legs gave out and she sank onto the cold stone steps, wrapping her arms around herself. The mountain wind cut through her traveling dress as if it were paper. Night was falling fast, and with it came a cold that had nothing to do with the season and everything to do with the absolute, terrifying reality of her situation. She was alone in a strange village, with no money, no prospects, and nowhere to go. She had gambled everything on letters from a stranger and lost it all. The tears came then, silent and bitter, freezing on her cheeks in the mountain air. And as darkness settled over the square and the temperature plummeted, Elena Morales wondered if this was how her story would end, frozen and forgotten, in a place whose name she barely knew how to pronounce. But fate, as it turned out, had other plans. Elena didn't know how long she sat there, shivering on the church steps as night swallowed the village. Time seemed to stretch and contract strangely, measured only by the increasing numbness in her fingers and toes. The square had emptied, as families retreated indoors for dinner, leaving only the sound of wind whistling through narrow streets and the occasional bleat of a goat being secured for the night. She should move, find the inn, beg for work, something, but the humiliation had drained her of all initiative. Every time she tried to stand, the image of Sebastian's cold dismissal paralyzed her again. Not suitable, past her prime, too old. The words looped endlessly in her mind. Senora, the voice came from the shadows, making Elena start. She looked up to see a figure approaching from the far side of the square, a man leading a donkey loaded with wrapped bundles. He walked with the steady gait of someone who'd spent the day on his feet, and as he came closer, Elena could make out a weathered face beneath a wool cap, dark eyes filled with concern. Senora, you can't stay out here, he said, his accent thicker and more rural than Sebastian's cultured Spanish. The temperature drops fast once the sun sets. Another hour and you'll freeze. I'm fine, Elena lied, though her teeth chattered audibly. The man studied her for a moment, taking in her city clothes, her single small suitcase, the tear tracks on her face now illuminated by the moon rising over the mountains. Understanding dawned in his expression. Ah, he said softly. "You're the woman who came on the coach, the one Don Sebastian was expecting." Elena's face burned with shame. "He was not. We were not. It didn't work out." "I see." The man's tone was carefully neutral, but Elena thought she detected a note of anger not directed at her. "And now you're sitting in the cold with nowhere to go." "I'll figure something out." "Will you?" The question wasn't unkind, just practical. "It's past dinner time. The inn won't give you a room without payment up front. And Navarredonda isn't Barcelona, Senora. We don't have many options for strangers, especially at night." Elena said nothing. What could she say? He was right. The man was quiet for a moment, seeming to wrestle with a decision. Then he sighed, the sound of someone acting against their better judgment, but unable to stop themselves. "My name is Miguel Andrade. I have a small house about 2 hours' walk from here up in the hills. It's not much. I'm a shepherd, a cheesemaker, but there's a fire and hot food. You can stay the night, at least until you decide what to do." Elena's head snapped up. "I can't possibly—" "You can't possibly what? Stay here and freeze? Wake up tomorrow with pneumonia or worse?" Miguel's voice was gentle but firm. "I have 3 children at home, Senora. A house full of family. You'll be perfectly safe, I give you my word. And in the morning, with a warm meal in you and a clear head, you can figure out your next step. I don't even know you." "No, but I know you." When Elena looked confused, he explained, "Or I know what you are, at least. Desperate, alone, and too proud to accept help even when you need it. I recognize it because I was that person myself once." Something in his voice made Elena look at him more carefully. Miguel Andrade was perhaps in his early 40s, with the lean, weathered look of someone who worked outdoors year-round. His hands were rough and calloused, his coat patched but clean. But his eyes held a kindness that Sebastian's had lacked, a warmth that suggested he'd known suffering and chose compassion because of it, not despite it. "I can't pay you," Elena said quietly. "Did I ask for payment?" Miguel extended his hand. "Come on. The walk is long and the path gets treacherous in the dark. We should leave now." Elena hesitated for just a moment longer. Then, having no better option and too exhausted to keep fighting, she placed her cold hand in his warm one and let him help her to her feet. Her legs were stiff from the cold and the long coach ride, and she stumbled slightly. Miguel steadied her with easy strength. "Can you walk?" "I can walk." "Good. Take this." He unwound a thick wool scarf from around his neck and wrapped it around her shoulders. "And hold on to Mateo here." He patted the donkey affectionately. "He's old and stubborn, but he knows the path better than I do." They left the square behind, walking through narrow streets that climbed steeply upward. The village fell away quickly, replaced by open hillside dotted with stone walls and dark shapes that Elena realized were sheep huddled together for warmth. The path was rocky and uneven, but Miguel walked with sure steps, occasionally pointing out obstacles in the moonlight. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked after they'd walked in silence for half an hour. "Helping me, I mean. You don't know anything about me." Miguel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My wife died 2 years ago. Carmen. We'd been married 15 years. She got pneumonia one winter, and by the time we could get her down to the doctor in the village, it was too late." "I'm sorry," Elena said softly. "After she died, I thought I'd go mad from the grief and the fear. 3 young children depending on me, and I could barely remember to eat. But people helped. Neighbors brought food, watched the children, kept me from drowning in despair. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in need, I would. We're all just one disaster away from being the person sitting on those church steps, Senora. Every single one of us." Elena felt fresh tears prick her eyes, but these were different. Not tears of shame, but of gratitude. "Call me Elena," she said. "Please." "Elena, then. And I'm Miguel. We're not formal in the mountains." The walk took longer than 2 hours because Elena was exhausted and unfamiliar with the terrain, but Miguel never showed impatience. He pointed out constellations, named distant peaks, told her about the eagles that nested in the crags. He spoke of his children, Lucia, who was 12 and learning to read, Diego, who was 9 and obsessed with the sheep, little Rosa, who was 5 and still asked for her mother at night. Finally, after what felt like climbing to the top of the world, they crested a hill and Elena saw a small stone house nestled against the hillside, smoke rising from its chimney, warm light spilled from its windows. As they approached, the door flew open and 3 children tumbled out, all talking at once. "Papa, Papa, you're so late. We were worried. Who's that? Why do you have a lady? Is she staying? Can she tell us stories?" Miguel laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and herded his excited children back inside. Yes, yes, all those things, but first, let Elena warm up. She's had a very long, very cold day. The house was small, just 2 rooms from what Elena could see, but spotlessly clean and wonderfully warm. A fire crackled in a large stone fireplace. Simple furniture, handmade but sturdy, dried herbs hanging from the beams, the smell of bread and something savory cooking in a pot over the fire. A young girl, Lucia, Elena presumed, was stirring the pot. She turned and studied Elena with grave, intelligent eyes that seemed too old for 12. "Papa, you brought someone home." "I did. Elena, these are my children, Lucia, Diego, and Rosa." Diego, a wiry boy with his father's eyes, grinned at her. "Did you get lost in the mountains?" "Something like that," Elena admitted. Little Rosa, tiny and dark-haired, peeked out from behind her father's legs. "Are you going to stay?" "Just for tonight," Elena said quickly. "I don't want to impose—" "You'll stay as long as you need to," Miguel interrupted firmly. "Lucia, set another bowl. Elena, sit by the fire before you collapse. We can sort everything else out tomorrow." And so Elena found herself sitting by a stranger's fire, warming her frozen hands, while 3 children and their father bustled around her with easy familiarity. It was such a stark contrast to the cold rejection in the square that she felt dizzy from it. When Lucia pressed a bowl of thick lamb stew into her hands, Elena had to blink back tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "all of you. You have no idea what this means." Miguel met her eyes across the fire, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection, the recognition of 2 souls who'd known loss and were still trying to find their way through the world. "We all need shelter from the storm sometimes," he said simply. "Eat, Elena. Tomorrow is soon enough for decisions." As Elena took her first bite of the hot stew, feeling warmth seep back into her bones while the wind howled outside, and 3 curious children asked her questions about Barcelona, she realized something profound. The worst moment of her life might have just led her to exactly where she needed to be. But whether she could trust this feeling, whether she could dare to hope again after such brutal disappointment, that was a question for tomorrow. Elena woke to the sound of wind battering the house and the unfamiliar sensation of warmth. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory rushed back. The rejection, Miguel's kindness, falling asleep by the fire, while Rosa chattered about her goat. Grey light filtered through the small window. Elena sat up, realizing she'd been covered with a heavy wool blanket sometime in the night. The fire had been tended. It crackled softly in the hearth. Through the window she could see nothing but white, snow falling so thickly it obscured everything beyond a few feet. "You're awake." Lucia appeared from the other room, carrying firewood. Up close, Elena could see how thin the girl was, how her dress had been let down multiple times and was still too short. "Papa said to let you sleep. He's outside checking on the sheep." "The snow. It started a few hours ago." Lucia added wood to the fire with practiced efficiency. "Papa thinks it'll last a few days. The spring storms are always the worst." "A few days." Elena's stomach tightened. "I should go back to the village. I'm intruding on your family." "In this?" Lucia gestured to the window where the snow had intensified to a near whiteout. "You'd be dead before you made it halfway down the mountain. No one goes anywhere in weather like this." The door burst open, admitting a blast of frigid air, and Miguel covered head to toe in snow. He stamped his feet and shook himself like a dog. "Storm's setting in hard. The sheep are secured in the lower shelter, but we won't be able to check on them again until it passes." He noticed Elena and offered a tired smile. "Good morning. I hope the children didn't wake you. They're not used to guests." "They didn't. I should help with—" "You should eat." Miguel moved to the pot hanging over the fire. "We have porridge and yesterday's bread." "Okay, it's simple, but it's hot." Diego appeared from the other room, dragging a protesting Rosa. "Papa, she won't get dressed. She says it's too cold." "It is too cold," Rosa insisted, her small face stubborn. Miguel sighed with the weariness of a single parent fighting battles on too many fronts. He ladled porridge into bowls while trying to negotiate with his youngest daughter. "Rosa, you can't stay in your nightdress all day." "Why not?" "I'm not going outside." "Because," Miguel paused, clearly struggling for a reason that would satisfy a 5-year-old, "because Elena is here, and we should show proper manners." Rosa turned her sharp gaze on Elena, assessing. "Elena doesn't care." "Do you, Elena?" Despite everything, Elena found herself smiling. "I don't care at all. In fact, I think staying in nightdresses on cold, snowy days sounds perfectly reasonable." Rosa beamed triumphantly, while Miguel shot Elena a look of amused exasperation. Now you've done it. She'll never get dressed now. But his tone was fond, and Elena glimpsed the love that bound this little family together, despite their losses and hardships. It made something ache in her chest, a longing she'd thought she'd learned to suppress years ago. They ate together, crowded around the fire. The porridge was thick and filling, sweetened with a bit of honey. The children asked Elena questions between bites, about Barcelona, about the sea they'd never seen, about why someone would leave the city for the mountains. I was looking for something different, Elena said carefully, not wanting to explain the whole humiliating truth. A new life. Did you find it? Lucia asked, with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. Elena met the girl's eyes and saw understanding there. Lucia knew something had gone wrong even if she didn't know the details. I don't know yet, Elena answered honestly. Sometimes life surprises us. The day passed slowly. The storm showed no sign of letting up. Miguel did various tasks around the house, sharpening tools, mending a broken chair leg, organizing supplies. The children, initially shy around Elena, gradually warmed to her presence. It was Diego who first handed her something to mend, a wool sock with a hole in the heel. Papa tried to fix it, but he's terrible at sewing, the boy announced, with the brutal honesty of the young. I heard that, Miguel called from across the room, but he was smiling. Eleanor examined the sock, which indeed had been badly darned with stitches too large and uneven to last. I can fix this properly if you'd like. I was a seamstress in Barcelona. Really? Lucia appeared at her elbow, eyes bright with interest. Did you make fancy dresses, like the ones in the pictures? Sometimes. Mostly I did alterations and repairs, but yes, I made some special gowns for weddings and celebrations. Lucia's face transformed with longing. I've always wanted to learn to sew properly. Mama knew how, but she died before she could teach me much. Papa tries, but his fingers are too big for the needle. Elena saw Miguel wince at the mention of his wife, but he didn't interrupt. She looked at Lucia's eager face, at Diego holding out another sock, hopefully, and made a decision. Get me a needle and thread and I'll show you. Both of you, if you'd like. What followed was unexpectedly pleasant. Eleanor sat by the fire with Lucia pressed close to one side and Diego on the other, demonstrating basic stitches. Lucia proved to be a quick learner, her slim fingers adapting easily to the rhythm of the needle. Even Diego, who'd initially claimed he didn't care about sewing, became absorbed in learning to mend his own socks. Miguel watched from where he was working, and Elena felt his gaze on her several times. She didn't know what he was thinking, but something in his expression made her self-conscious in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Little Rosa, not to be left out, demanded that Elena teach her too. Her fingers were too small to manage the needle properly, but Elena showed her how to sort buttons and thread, praising each task as if it were vitally important. Rosa glowed under the attention. As afternoon faded to evening and the storm continued its assault on the house, Eleanor found herself caught up in the rhythms of this family's life. She helped Lucia prepare dinner, a hearty soup with vegetables and chunks of the cheese Miguel made. She listened to Diego's excited explanation of sheep behavior. She told Rosa a story about the sea, making the little girl's eyes go wide with wonder. And through it all she felt Miguel watching her, a question forming in his eyes that neither of them was ready to speak aloud yet. That night, after the children had been tucked into bed in the other room and the house had quieted, Elena and Miguel sat by the fire. The storm still raged outside, but inside it was warm and peaceful. Thank you, Miguel said finally, for today. The children, they've been so withdrawn since Carmen died, but today they laughed. Lucia hasn't looked that happy in months. They're wonderful children, Eleanor said honestly. You've done well with them. I've tried. But I'm just one person and they need... He trailed off, staring into the fire. They need a mother, Elena finished quietly. Miguel looked at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. I didn't bring you here thinking... I wasn't planning. I know, Elena said. You were just being kind. But now that you're here, Miguel continued carefully, and seeing you with them, how natural it is. I find myself thinking things I probably shouldn't. Elena's heart beat faster. What kind of things? Before he could answer, a crash came from the other room, followed by Rosa's frightened cry. They both jumped up, rushing to find that the wind had blown open a shutter, letting in snow and cold air. Rosa was standing on the bed, crying, while Lucia and Diego tried to close the shutter against the wind. They spent the next hour securing the room, soothing Rosa, getting everyone settled again. By the time they returned to the fire, the moment had passed, the conversation impossible to resume. But as Elena lay down to sleep that night, wrapped in borrowed blankets with the sounds of the family breathing softly around her, she realized something had shifted. The question wasn't whether she could imagine a life here anymore. It was whether she dared to believe such a life might actually be possible, and whether she had the courage to reach for it after being rejected so cruelly the day before. Outside, the storm howled through the mountains, burying the world in snow, and inside, Elena Morales lay awake, feeling the first fragile shoots of hope beginning to grow in the frozen soil of her heart. The storm lasted 3 days, and with each passing day, Elena slipped more naturally into the rhythms of Miguel's household. What had started as uncomfortable charity began to feel like something else, a tentative belonging she was afraid to name. On the second morning, Elena woke before dawn to find Lucia struggling with breakfast preparations. The girl was trying to manage the fire, cook porridge, and keep Rosa from underfoot all at once. "Let me help," Elena offered, moving to take the wooden spoon from Lucia's hand. Lucia hesitated, pride warring with relief. "Papa says I'm supposed to manage the house while he tends the animals. I'm the woman of the family now." The words, spoken with such grave responsibility by a 12-year-old, made Elena's heart ache. She knelt down to Lucia's level, looking the girl in the eyes. Being the woman of the family doesn't mean doing everything alone. Even grown women need help sometimes, and there's no shame in accepting it. Something in Lucia's rigid posture softened. "Mama used to say that too. Your mama was right." Elena squeezed Lucia's thin shoulder gently. "Now why don't you show me where everything is, and we'll do this together." What followed was a morning of unexpected partnership. Lucia knew where things were stored, how Miguel liked his porridge, what the children would and wouldn't eat. Elena knew techniques for stretching ingredients, making meals more flavorful with the limited supplies available, managing time efficiently. Together they transformed breakfast from a chaotic scramble into something almost graceful. When Miguel came in from checking on the sheep, stamping snow from his boots, he stopped in the doorway and stared. The table was set, porridge steamed in bowls, supplemented with toasted bread and some of the dried fruit Elena had brought from Barcelona. The children were already seated and eating, and Lucia was smiling. "We made breakfast together," Lucia announced proudly. "Elena knows so many things, Papa. Did you know you can toast bread directly over the fire if you're careful? And she showed me how to cut the bread so it toasts evenly." Miguel's eyes met Elena's over his daughter's head, and the gratitude there was unmistakable. "It looks wonderful, thank you." "Lucia did most of it," Elena said quickly. "I just helped a little." "You did more than help," Lucia insisted, with the fierce honesty of the young. "You made everything easier." "Better." As they ate, Elena noticed Diego watching her with cautious curiosity. The boy had been more reserved than his sisters, maintaining a careful distance. Elena didn't push, understanding that some children needed more time to adjust to strangers. But after breakfast, as Elena was helping Lucia clear the table, Diego approached with something hidden behind his back. "Elena," his voice was uncertain, if you're not busy, Papa says I read too slowly. He tries to help, but he gets frustrated because he has so much other work. Would you maybe listen to me practice?" He revealed a small, worn book, a collection of simple stories. Eleanor's throat tightened at the trust implied in the request. "I would love to," she said warmly. They sat by the fire while Diego struggled through a story about a shepherd boy and his adventures. He was right. He read slowly, stumbling over longer words, having to sound out syllables. But he was determined, and when Elena praised his efforts and helped him with difficult words without making him feel stupid, his face lit up with pride. "You're very patient," Miguel said quietly, appearing at her shoulder after Diego had finished and run off to play with Rosa. "More patient than I managed to be. I love my son, but hearing him struggle through the same words day after day, it's easier for me," Elena admitted. "I don't have the weight of 100 other responsibilities making me anxious, and besides, he's improving. He just needs confidence. He needs a proper teacher, but there's no school up here, and I can't afford to send him to the village." Miguel's frustration was evident. "Carmen used to teach them, but since she died, I could help," Elena heard herself say. "While I'm here, I mean. I'm not a trained teacher, but I know how to read and write. I could work with all 3 of them." Miguel turned to look at her fully, and something in his expression made Elena's breath catch. "You're talking as if you might stay more than a few days." Elena faltered, suddenly uncertain. "The storm. I meant, while the storm lasts." The storm will end tomorrow, Miguel said softly. Maybe tonight. The wind's already shifting. The words hung between them, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with weather. Elena felt panic rising in her chest. Leave tomorrow? Return to the village, to the inn she couldn't afford, to figuring out how to get back to Barcelona with no money. The thought made her feel ill, but staying was impossible. Miguel had offered her shelter from the storm, nothing more. She couldn't simply attach herself to this family like a stray dog, hoping for scraps of belonging. Elena, Miguel's voice was gentle. What happened in the village? With Don Sebastian. Elena looked away, shame flooding through her. What do you think happened? He took one look at me and decided I wasn't suitable. Because? Because I'm too old. The words came out bitter. Because I'm 38 with grey hair and lines around my eyes, and he wanted someone young who could give him children. He said I'd misrepresented myself, but I hadn't. I told him exactly how old I was. He just didn't want to believe it, I suppose, or hoped I'd somehow look younger than my years. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a thread of anger. Sebastian is a fool. Elena laughed, but it came out more like a sob. He's a practical man. He wants sons, a proper wife, not a woman past childbearing. And what do you want, Elena? The question surprised her. She turned to find Miguel watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. I want... She stopped, afraid to voice the truth. Tell me, he prompted gently. I want to not be alone anymore, Elena whispered. I want to matter to someone. I want to wake up with purpose, to have people who need me, to build something that means something. I thought Sebastian could offer that, but I was wrong, and now I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You could stay here. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Miguel took a breath, clearly working up courage. Stay here, not as a guest, as part of the family. The children already adore you. You've done more for them in 3 days than I've managed in 2 years. And He paused, his weathered face coloring slightly. I find myself hoping you'll say yes. You're offering me charity, Elena said, though her heart was pounding. Out of kindness. I'm offering partnership, Miguel corrected. I'm offering what Sebastian should have offered, a real partnership built on respect and honest need. This family needs you, Elena, and I hope that maybe you need us too. You barely know me. I know you're good with children. I know you're hardworking and kind. I know you're brave enough to travel across Spain alone to start a new life. I know you're honest enough to have told Sebastian your real age, even though you must have known it could count against you. Miguel's voice grew stronger. I don't need to know more than that. The rest we can learn together. Elena felt tears welling up. Miguel, I can't give you children either. That ship sailed years ago. I have children, Miguel said simply. 3 of them who desperately need a mother. I don't need more babies, Elena. I need someone who will love the ones I already have. Someone who will be a partner in this hard life. Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and keep going anyway. It was too much. Too fast. Elena's mind spun with questions and fears. Could this possibly work? Could she trust this after being rejected so cruelly just days ago? What if Miguel changed his mind too, once the novelty wore off? But before she could voice any of these concerns, Rosa came running in from the other room, her face bright with excitement. Elena, Diego says you'll teach us to read better. Is it true? Can we start now? The little girl grabbed Elena's hand, tugging insistently, and Elena found herself looking down into those trusting eyes, feeling the small warm hand in hers, and something inside her simply settled. Yes, she heard herself say to Rosa, we can start now. Then she looked at Miguel, her heart in her throat. And yes, she said more quietly, I'll stay, if you're certain. Miguel's face transformed, relief and joy replacing the careful hope. I'm certain. Then I suppose we should discuss the practical arrangements, Elena said, trying to sound businesslike despite the tears streaming down her face. Because I won't be charity, Miguel. I'll earn my place here. You already have, Miguel said softly. But he was smiling, and for the first time since arriving in the mountains, Elena felt something unfurl in her chest that felt dangerously like happiness. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to break. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating the snow-covered mountains with brilliant light, and inside the small stone house, Elena Morales took the first real breath she'd taken in years, surrounded by the sounds of children's laughter and the warmth of a fire that was beginning to feel like home. The morning after the storm broke dawned clear and blindingly bright. Elena woke to find Miguel already gone, out checking on the sheep who'd been sheltered during the blizzard. The children were still asleep, their breathing soft and even in the early light. Elena lay still for a moment, processing the enormity of what she'd agreed to. Stay, build a life here with these people she barely knew. It should have terrified her. Perhaps it did, a little. But beneath the fear was something stronger, a determination to make this work, to prove to herself that she could build something real from the ashes of her humiliation. She rose quietly and rekindled the fire, moving through the morning tasks with growing confidence. By the time the children woke, breakfast was ready and the house was warm. Lucia appeared first, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and stopped in surprise. "You're still here." "Of course I am." "Where would I go?" "I thought—" Lucia bit her lip. "I thought maybe you'd leave once the storm ended." "Everyone leaves." The pain in those words made Elena's chest tighten. How many people had drifted through this family's life since Carmen's death, offering temporary help before moving on? How many times had these children watched someone walk away? Elena crossed to Lucia and took her hands. "I'm not leaving, Lucia. Your father asked me to stay, and I said yes. I'm here for as long as you'll have me." Lucia searched Elena's face for any sign of deception. Finding none, she threw her arms around Elena's waist and held on tight. Elena stroked the girl's dark hair, feeling the child's thin shoulders shake with silent tears of relief. When Miguel returned an hour later, his boots crunching in the deep snow, he found his household transformed. Breakfast was on the table. The children were clean and dressed. Elena was showing Rosa how to fold blankets properly. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't since Carmen's death. "2 sheep injured in the shelter," he announced, stamping snow from his boots. "Nothing serious, but I'll need to tend them today. The path down to the lower pasture needs to be cleared too," and he stopped, seeming to realize he was cataloguing problems to himself, old habits of a man carrying too much alone. "Tell me what needs doing," Eleanor said calmly. "I can't clear paths or tend sheep, but I can manage the house and children. Make a list of what you need from the village, and once the paths are clear enough, I'll take Lucia, and we'll go down together." Miguel blinked at her. "You'd go into the village? After what happened? I'll have to face it eventually." Elena kept her voice steady despite the anxiety curling in her stomach. "Better to do it quickly before I lose my nerve. Besides, we need supplies if I'm staying. I have nothing but what I carried in my bag. You don't have to—" "Miguel," Elena met his eyes firmly. "If I'm part of this family, then I take on family responsibilities. That includes dealing with nosy villagers and their gossip. I won't hide up here like I have something to be ashamed of." A slow smile spread across Miguel's face. "You're a brave woman, Elena Morales." "I'm a stubborn woman," Elena corrected. "There's a difference." The next few days established new patterns. Miguel taught Elena about the rhythms of mountain life, when to check on the animals, how to predict weather changes, what signs meant danger from wolves or bears. Elena taught the children their letters, helped with chores, and began to understand the delicate balance of surviving in such isolation. Diego proved particularly eager to learn about the sheep. Miguel took him out each morning now, showing him how to check hooves for rot, how to spot illness early, how to move the flock to fresh grazing. The boy glowed under his father's attention. Rosa attached herself to Elena like a barnacle, following her everywhere, chattering constantly. "Tell me about the sea again. Tell me about the big buildings. Did you ever see a queen? Can you make dolls from fabric scraps?" Lucia was quieter, but no less transformed. She absorbed everything Elena taught her about sewing, cooking, managing a household, but it was in the evenings when they sat together working on needlework that she began to open up about her mother. "Mama loved to sing," Lucia said one night, her needle moving steadily through fabric. She knew all these old songs from her grandmother, but after she got sick, she couldn't sing anymore. The coughing, Elena reached over and squeezed the girl's hand. "Tell me about her. What was she like?" Lucia's face softened with memory. "She was beautiful. Not fancy beautiful. She never had nice clothes or jewelry, but when she smiled, it was like sunshine. She made Papa laugh, and she always knew what to say when we were sad or scared. She sounds wonderful." She was. Lucia was quiet for a moment. "I was afraid I'd forget her, but having you here, it doesn't make me forget. It makes it easier to remember the good parts instead of just the bad parts at the end." Elena had to blink back tears. "That's the greatest compliment anyone has ever given me, Lucia." A week after the storm, Elena and Lucia made their first trip down to Navaredonda. The path was treacherous with ice, but Elena had borrowed Carmen's old boots and wool coat. The village looked different in the bright sunshine, less threatening, just a small collection of stone buildings where people were going about their lives. But as Elena and Lucia entered the square, conversations stopped, heads turned. Elena felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispers starting. She lifted her chin and kept walking toward the general store. Inside, the shopkeeper, a round woman named Señora Martinez, looked up and her eyes widened. "Señora Morales, we heard that is, Don Sebastián said." "I'm staying with the Andrade family," Elena said calmly, handing over the list Miguel had made. "We need these supplies, please." Señora Martinez's eyes flickered to Lucia, then back to Elena. Understanding dawned, followed by something that looked like approval. "The Andrade family. Well, that's good. Those children need someone. Miguel's a good man, but raising 3 little ones alone." She bustled about gathering items. "How are you finding mountain life, then?" "Challenging but rewarding," Elena replied honestly. "Takes a strong woman to survive up there, especially in winter." Señora Martinez paused, seeming to wrestle with herself. Then she added more quietly, "Don Sebastián is a fool. You're worth 10 of the vapid girls he's been courting since his wife died 3 years ago." The unexpected defense made Elena's throat tight. "Thank you." As they left the shop, arms full of parcels, they nearly collided with Don Sebastián himself. He stopped short, his face registering surprise and something that might have been embarrassment. "Señora Morales, Don Sebastián." Elena's voice was cool but polite. "I heard that you were—" He seemed unable to complete a sentence. "The Shepherd family. The Andrade family has been very kind to me." Sebastian's eyes narrowed slightly. "I see. Well, I hope you find what you're looking for, Señora." "I already have," Elena said calmly. She took Lucia's hand and walked past him without looking back. Only when they'd left the village and were climbing the mountain path again did Elena allow herself to tremble. Lucia squeezed her hand. "You were so brave, Elena. I wish I could be brave like that." "You are brave," Elena assured her. "You've been brave every day since your mother died. I'm just learning from you." When they reached the house, Miguel was outside repairing a section of wall. He straightened as they approached, his eyes going immediately to Elena's face, checking. "How was it?" "Tolerable," Elena said. "I suspect there will be gossip for a few weeks, but nothing I can't handle." Miguel studied her face, then nodded slowly. "You're stronger than I thought, and I already thought you were strong." That night, after the children were asleep, and she and Miguel sat by the fire as had become their habit, he said quietly, "You don't have to stay if this life is too hard, Elena. I meant what I offered, but I also understand if it's not what you expected." Elena looked around the small house, at the mended clothes folded neatly, at the sleeping children she'd already grown to love, at the simple life that was so far from anything she'd imagined in Barcelona. Then she looked at Miguel, at his honest face and kind eyes, at the man who'd given her shelter when she had nothing. "This is exactly what I need," she said firmly, "not what I expected. Something better." Miguel's answering smile was worth more than all of Sebastian's pretty letters combined, and as Elena settled into sleep that night, she realized that somewhere in the past week, the mountain house had stopped being shelter and started being home. Spring crept slowly into the Sierra de Gredos. The snow retreated up the peaks, leaving behind brown grass that slowly greened. Ice melted from streams, turning them into rushing torrents. And in the Andrade household, something else was beginning to thaw, the careful walls Miguel and Elena had both built around their hearts. It started with small things. Miguel's hand accidentally brushing Elena's as they both reached for the water bucket, the way he watched her teaching the children, his expression soft. How Elena found herself taking extra care with her appearance in the mornings, smoothing her hair and wearing the nicer of her 2 blouses. Diego noticed first, with the blunt observation of children. "Papa smiles more now," he announced one morning while they were tending the sheep. "He used to be sad all the time. Now he's happy." Miguel, overhearing, felt his face color. "I wasn't sad. I was just tired." "You were sad, Papa," Lucia said gently. "It's okay. We were all sad. But Elena makes everything lighter somehow." She wasn't wrong. Elena's presence had transformed their days from mere survival into something that resembled actual living. There was laughter at meals now, stories in the evenings. The house felt full instead of empty, but beneath the growing ease, tension was building, the unspoken question of what exactly they were to each other. Elena was still technically a guest, though she'd been there a month. They hadn't discussed the future beyond vague assurances. And Miguel's original offer to stay as part of the family hung between them, undefined and confusing. The breaking point came on a warm April afternoon. Miguel had taken Diego down to the village for the monthly market, leaving Elena with the girls. They were outside enjoying the sunshine, while Rosa played with a makeshift doll Elena had sewn from scraps. Lucia was unusually quiet, her brow furrowed as she worked on her embroidery. "What's troubling you, sweet girl?" Elena asked. Lucia bit her lip, then blurted out, "Are you going to marry Papa?" Eleanor's needle stopped mid-stitch. What makes you ask that?" "Because you live here, because you take care of us, because Papa looks at you the way he used to look at Mama, like you're special." Lucia's dark eyes were worried. "But if you're not going to marry him, then you might leave, and I don't want you to leave." Elena set down her sewing carefully. "Come here." Lucia moved to sit beside her, and Elena wrapped an arm around the girl's thin shoulders. "First, I'm not leaving. I promised you that, remember? Second, your papa and we haven't talked about marriage yet. We're both being careful because we've both been hurt before." "But you love him, don't you?" Lucia asked with devastating directness. "And he loves you. Did she love Miguel?" Elena examined her heart honestly. She loved his kindness, his gentle strength, the way he was with his children. She loved his laugh, which came more easily now. She loved the peace she felt in his presence, the way he made her feel valued and needed. Was that love, or was it gratitude and companionship? "I care for him very much," Elena said carefully, "and for all of you. But love, that's a serious thing. It takes time to build. Mama said love was choosing to care for someone every day, even when it's hard," Lucia said softly. "If that's what love is, then you already love us, because you choose us every day." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Your mama was a wise woman. So are you," Lucia said, with simple faith that made Elena's heart ache. That evening, after the children were in bed, Elena and Miguel sat by the fire as usual. But tonight the silence felt heavier, weighted with unspoken words. "Lucia asked me today if I was going to marry you," Elena said finally, deciding to face it directly. Miguel went very still. "What did you tell her?" "That we hadn't discussed it, that we're being careful." Elena took a breath. "But it made me realize we need to have that discussion, Miguel. We can't keep drifting in this undefined state. It's not fair to the children, and it's not fair to us." Miguel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and uncertain. "I'm afraid, Elena. Afraid to hope for too much. Afraid of ruining what we already have." "I'm afraid too," Elena admitted. "After what happened with Sebastian, the idea of putting my heart on the line again terrifies me. What he did was cruel and stupid." Anger crept into Miguel's voice. "You are—" He stopped, struggling for words. "You're everything he should have wanted. Smart, kind, strong, beautiful in ways that matter. If he couldn't see that, he's blind." Elena felt warmth flood through her. "You think I'm beautiful? I think you're extraordinary." Miguel turned to face her fully, firelight illuminating his weathered face. "When I found you on those church steps, I just saw someone who needed help. But these past weeks, Elena, you've brought life back to this house. You've given my children hope again. You've made me feel like a whole person instead of just a man going through the motions. How could I not find you beautiful?" Elena's breath caught. "Miguel, I know I'm not much," he continued, the words tumbling out now. "I'm just a shepherd with a small house and 3 children, and nothing to offer but hard work and simple living. I can't give you the life Sebastian promised. No shop in the village, no fine things. But I can promise you'll never be alone again. I can promise you'll matter every single day, and I can promise I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful you stayed." Tears were streaming down Elena's face now. "You foolish man. Don't you understand? I don't want what Sebastian offered. I never did, really. I wanted what I thought those things represented. Belonging, purpose, a place to matter. But I've found all of that here with you and the children. This simple life is worth more than all his merchant's gold." Miguel reached out tentatively and cupped her face in his rough, calloused hand. "Are you certain? Because once I ask you properly, once we make this real, I won't let you go easily." "I'm certain," Elena whispered. "I'm more certain of this than I've been of anything in years." "Then, Elena Morales," Miguel took both her hands in his voice shaking slightly, "would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of being a mother to my children? Of building this life together, whatever challenges come?" "Yes," the word came out choked with tears. "Yes, Miguel, I will." He pulled her into his arms then, and Elena felt something inside her finally, completely relax. This was nothing like the careful courtship with Sebastian built on letters and fantasy. This was real and solid and right. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "The children will be thrilled," Miguel said, wiping his eyes. "Especially Rosa. She's been planning our wedding in her head for weeks, apparently. She told me yesterday you need a crown of flowers." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "Then a crown of flowers I shall have." They sat together by the fire, hands clasped, making quiet plans. They would marry in the village church as soon as the priest could arrange it. Simple ceremony, just family and a few neighbors. Elena would wear Carmen's wedding dress. Lucia had shyly offered it, saying her mother would have wanted it. "I'll never try to replace her," Elena said seriously. "The children loved her. They should always love her." "You're not replacing her," Miguel assured her. "You're something new, something different. They'll love you differently, but no less truly." "And Carmen?" He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "Carmen would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed someone who could match my stubbornness. She'd be glad her children will have a mother again." Later, as Elena lay down to sleep, she heard quiet footsteps. Lucia appeared in the doorway, her face anxious. "Is it true? Are you really staying forever?" "Forever," Elena confirmed, holding out her arms. Lucia dove into the embrace, and soon Rosa appeared too, somehow sensing the moment despite being supposedly asleep. Then Diego, trying to look nonchalant, but unable to hide his smile. Miguel found them like that. Elena surrounded by his children, all of them tangled together in a heap of limbs and happiness. He joined them, and for a moment, they just held each other. A family not yet legally bound but already complete in all the ways that mattered. Outside, the mountain night was cold and star-filled, but inside the small stone house, warmth had finally driven out the last shadows of winter. And Elena Morales, who had arrived in these mountains rejected and hopeless, fell asleep surrounded by love, knowing she was finally, truly home. The joy of the engagement lasted 3 beautiful days before reality intruded. Elena and Lucia had gone down to the village to speak with the priest about wedding arrangements and to visit the dressmaker about altering Carmen's wedding gown. They were walking through the square, arms linked, when they encountered a woman Elena hadn't met before. She was perhaps 50, well-dressed by village standards, with sharp eyes that assessed Elena from head to toe. "So you're the new woman," she said without preamble, "the one Miguel Andrade is planning to marry." Elena felt Lucia tense beside her. "I'm Elena Morales, and you are?" "Beatriz Sandoval, Carmen's cousin." The woman's voice was cold. "I think we need to talk, Señora Morales. Alone." Elena squeezed Lucia's hand. "Go on to the dressmaker. I'll meet you there shortly." Lucia looked reluctant, but obeyed. Once she was out of earshot, Beatriz gestured to a bench by the church. They sat, and Elena waited for whatever was coming. "You've been in the mountains for barely a month," Beatriz began, her tone sharp. "And already you've insinuated yourself into my cousin's family. Already convinced a grieving man to marry you. How convenient for you, having nowhere else to go." Elena felt anger flare but kept her voice level. "Miguel asked me to marry him. I didn't seduce or manipulate him." "Didn't you?" Beatriz's eyes narrowed. "A desperate woman, rejected by another man, with no money and no prospects. Of course you'd latch onto the first lonely widower who showed you kindness. But did you think about what's best for those children? Or were you only thinking of yourself?" "How dare you?" "Carmen was my family," Beatriz interrupted. "I loved her like a sister, and those children are my blood. I won't stand by while some stranger replaces her before she's barely cold in her grave." "I'm not trying to replace anyone," Elena said firmly. "And Carmen has been gone for 2 years. At what point is Miguel allowed to move on? To find happiness again?" "Happiness?" Beatriz laughed bitterly. "You think you can make him happy? You don't know these mountains, don't know this life. You're a city woman playing at being a shepherd's wife. When the novelty wears off, when the reality of endless hard winters and isolation sets in, you'll leave, and those children will be heartbroken again." The words hit closer to home than Elena wanted to admit. Wasn't there truth in them? She was a city woman. She didn't know this life, not really. What if she couldn't handle it long term? What if she did end up leaving? Beatriz saw the doubt flicker across Elena's face and pressed her advantage. Carmen grew up in these mountains. She understood this life in her bones. She could handle anything. Brutal winters, isolation, the constant work. And she gave Miguel 3 children. What can you give him? You're too old for more babies. In a few years you'll be a middle-aged woman who can barely remember life with Diego and Rosa as infants. How will you relate to them as they grow? Love isn't only about understanding every experience, Eleanor said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe not, but marriage is about partnership, about being equals. Can you truly be Miguel's equal? Or will you always be the charity case he rescued from the church steps? The cruelty of the words made Elena flinch. Beatriz stood, brushing off her skirts. Think about what's best for those children, Señora Morales. Think about whether you're really what they need or just convenient. Carmen's memory deserves better than being erased by the first desperate woman who came along. She walked away, leaving Eleanor sitting alone on the bench, her mind churning with doubts. Was Beatriz right? Was she being selfish? The children seemed happy, but they were young and desperate for a mother, any mother. Would they eventually resent her? Would Miguel wake up one day and realize he'd married her out of necessity rather than genuine love? Elena was still sitting there, frozen with uncertainty, when Lucia found her 20 minutes later. The girl took one look at her face and understood immediately. Cousin Beatriz found you. Elena managed a weak smile. She had some concerns about my marrying your father. She's awful, Lucia said fiercely. She's been awful since Mama died. She wanted Papa to move to the village, give up the sheep, let her control everything. When he refused, she got angry. She doesn't care about what we need. She just wants to be in charge. She loved your mother very much. She loved controlling Mama too. Mama used to say Beatriz meant well but couldn't help meddling. Lucia sat beside Elena, small and serious. Elena, you can't let her poison you. You can't let her make you doubt everything. What if she's right, though? Elena heard herself ask. What if I'm not strong enough for this life? What if I end up failing you all? Lucia grabbed both of Elena's hands, her young face urgent. You won't fail. You haven't failed yet, and you've already faced harder things than most people do in a lifetime. You lost your husband. You were rejected cruelly. You started over with nothing. If that didn't break you, why would this? Elena felt tears welling up. You're very wise for 12. I'm wise because you taught me to think for myself instead of just accepting what people tell me, Lucia countered. Now think for yourself. Forget what Cousin Beatriz says. What do you want? What does your heart tell you? Eleanor closed her eyes, reaching past the fear and doubt to the truth underneath. What did she want? She wanted the feeling of purpose she had when teaching Diego to read. She wanted the sound of Rosa's laughter. She wanted the quiet satisfaction of a well-run household. She wanted Miguel's strong, gentle presence beside her. She wanted to belong to this family that had already claimed her heart. I want to stay, she whispered. I want to be your mother and Miguel's wife. I want to build this life. Whatever challenges come, then do it, Lucia said simply. And forget Cousin Beatriz. But forgetting proved harder than Elena expected. Beatriz's words haunted her as they returned to the house. She found herself watching Miguel with new uncertainty. Did he truly want to marry her, or was it just convenience? Was their growing affection real, or was she just a solution to his childcare problems? That night, Miguel noticed her distraction immediately. After the children were asleep, he pulled her aside. What happened in the village? Lucia won't tell me, but something's wrong. Elena hesitated, then told him about the encounter with Beatriz. Miguel's face darkened as she spoke. Beatriz has no right. But what if she has a point? Elena interrupted. Miguel, we haven't known each other long. We're building this on necessity and hope, not years of courtship. What if we're making a mistake? Miguel was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and took Elena's hands, pulling her to her feet. Come with me. He led her outside into the cool night air, up a small hill behind the house. The moon was bright, illuminating the valley below, the silver ribbon of the stream, the dark shapes of the mountains beyond, the vast starry sky. This, Miguel said softly, is what I see every night. This beauty, this peace. And for 2 years it felt empty. Carmen and I built a good life here, but when she died, the mountains felt like a tomb. I went through the motions, tending sheep, raising children, but I was hollow inside. He turned to face Elena fully. Then you came, and suddenly the mountains weren't a tomb anymore. They were a home again. Not because you replaced Carmen. No one could do that. But because you brought your own light, your own warmth. You made me remember what it feels like to look forward to tomorrow. But Beatriz said, Beatriz is bitter because her own life didn't turn out as she hoped. Miguel interrupted gently. She's not wrong that this life is hard. She's not wrong that you're different from Carmen. But she's wrong to think that makes you unsuitable. Carmen was perfect for me when I was a young man. You're perfect for me now as the man I've become through loss and hardship. How can you be so sure? Because I watch you with my children, because I see how you handle setbacks, because you make decisions with your head and your heart together, which is exactly what this life requires. Miguel cupped her face gently. Elena, I'm not marrying you because I need a housekeeper or a childminder. I'm marrying you because you're the woman I want to wake up beside every morning. The woman I want to face whatever comes with. The woman I'm falling in love with. Elena's breath caught. You love me? I'm getting there, Miguel said with a soft smile. And I think you're getting there too. Is that not enough reason to take the leap? Elena thought about Barcelona, about the empty apartment and the endless lonely nights. She thought about Sebastian's rejection. She thought about Beatrice's cruel words. Then she thought about Lucia's fierce loyalty, about Diego's proud smile when he read a difficult passage, about Rosa calling her mama yesterday without thinking. She thought about Miguel's steady presence, his kindness, the way he made her feel valued and seen. It's enough, she whispered. More than enough. Miguel kissed her then, gentle and promising, and Elena felt the last of her doubts dissolve. Beatrice was wrong. This wasn't convenience or desperation. This was two broken people choosing to be whole together. It was imperfect and unconventional and absolutely right. When they returned to the house, Elena felt lighter than she had in days. Beatrice could disapprove all she wanted. The villagers could gossip. None of it mattered. Because Elena had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The only opinions that mattered were those of the family she was building, Miguel and 3 children who already loved her for exactly who she was. And that was enough. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May, when the mountain wildflowers would be at their peak. Elena threw herself into preparations with an energy that surprised even herself. This would be nothing like the elaborate church ceremonies she'd sewn gowns for in Barcelona. This would be simple, intimate, real. Carmen's wedding dress hung in the main room, carefully cleaned and altered to fit Elena's slightly taller frame. Lucia worked beside her, learning advanced stitching techniques as they modified the gown. The dress was beautiful, simple cream wool with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and neckline. Carmen had clearly been talented with a needle. Mama made this herself, Lucia said one afternoon, running her fingers over the embroidery. Grandmother helped, but Mama did most of it. She said a woman should make her own wedding dress. It brings luck. Elena paused in her stitching. Lucia, are you truly comfortable with me wearing this? I want you to wear it, Lucia interrupted firmly. It's beautiful, and Mama would want it used. And she hesitated, then continued quietly. It feels right somehow. Like Mama's blessing. Elena hugged the girl tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude for her generosity. At 12, Lucia was already more mature than some women twice her age, but not everyone shared Lucia's grace. Word of the wedding had spread through the village, and opinions were divided. Some villagers, like Senora Martinez from the general store, were supportive. Miguel needs a wife, and those children need a mother, she declared loudly whenever anyone tried to gossip in her shop. What does it matter that she's from the city? She's proven herself. Others were less kind. Beatrice had been vocal about her disapproval, and her friends echoed her concerns. Unseemly, they whispered. Too fast, not proper. Elena tried to ignore the gossip, but it was hard. She'd face stares whenever she went to the village, whispers that stopped abruptly when she approached. Only her determination to prove them all wrong kept her going. A week before the wedding, Miguel took Elena to meet his parents. They lived in a slightly larger house on the other side of the mountain, where his father kept goats and his mother sold cheese and wool at the market. Elena was nervous. These would be her in-laws, the grandparents of the children she'd be raising. Miguel's mother, Teresa, was a weathered woman with kind eyes and capable hands. She studied Elena for a long moment when they arrived, her gaze assessing but not unkind. So you're the one who has my Miguel smiling again? I hope so, Elena said honestly. Teresa snorted. No hoping about it. I saw him at market last week. He looked 10 years younger. Beatrice came by yesterday trying to poison me against you, but I told her to mind her own business. Elena felt relief flood through her. I'm grateful for that. Don't be grateful yet. I want to know your intentions. Are you here because you love my son and those children, or because you needed somewhere to land after that fool Sebastian rejected you? The bluntness should have been insulting, but Elena appreciated the honesty. Both, she answered truthfully. I did need somewhere to land, but I've come to love them all. Miguel and Lucia and Diego and Rosa. I wouldn't stay if I didn't. I may be desperate, but I'm not cruel enough to pretend emotions I don't feel. Teresa studied her for another long moment, then nodded sharply. Good. Honesty is what matters. Miguel's father and I married for practical reasons too. Our families arranged it. But we built love over time through work and children and weathering storms together. That's more solid than any romantic whirlwind. She pulled Elena into a surprisingly strong hug. Welcome to the family, daughter. And ignore Beatrice. She's always been jealous of anyone who has what she doesn't. Miguel's father, Juan, was quieter but equally accepting. Treat them well, he said simply, and we'll get along fine. The relief Elena felt was enormous. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed their approval until she received it. On the Tuesday before the wedding, Elena and the children walked down to the village to deliver invitations to the few neighbors Miguel wanted to invite. They were heading back up the mountain path when they encountered Don Sebastian. He was coming down from one of the higher farms, probably checking on supplies for his shop. He stopped short when he saw them, his face registering surprise and something else, regret perhaps or embarrassment. Senora Morales. Don Sebastian. Elena's voice was cool but polite. Rosa was holding her hand tightly, sensing tension. Sebastian's eyes moved over the children, then back to Elena. I heard you're getting married. To Miguel Andrade. This Saturday. I see. He seemed to struggle with what to say next. I hope, that is, I wish you well. Thank you. Elena started to move past him, but he stopped her with a word. Wait, please. Sebastian looked genuinely uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, Senora. What I did, what I said when you arrived, it was cruel, unforgivable, really. You deserved better. Elena studied him, seeing what she'd missed in those letters, a man so focused on his own needs and expectations that he couldn't see the person in front of him. You're right, I did deserve better, and I found it. With a shepherd, Sebastian said, and there was just enough condescension in his tone to make Elena's spine stiffen. With a good man who values me for who I am, not who he wishes I was, Elena corrected firmly. With children who accept me with open hearts, with a life that's real and honest and worth living. Yes, Don Sebastian, with a shepherd, and I count myself lucky. She didn't wait for his response, just gathered the children and continued up the mountain. But she could feel his eyes on her back, watching them go. I don't like him, Rosa announced once they were out of earshot. He has mean eyes. He's not mean, Diego said thoughtfully. Just small, like his heart is too small for anything big. Elena was startled by the perception. That's very wise, Diego. Papa says some people make themselves small by only caring about little things, the boy explained. Don Sebastian only cares about his shop and looking important. Papa cares about us and the sheep and the mountains. Papa's bigger. Out of the mouths of children, Elena thought. She'd spent months corresponding with Sebastian, building fantasies around his letters, imagining a life with him. But Miguel, who'd written her no pretty words and made no grand promises, was indeed the bigger man in every way that mattered. That night, Miguel found her sitting outside, watching the sun set over the peaks. He joined her, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. Lucia told me you saw Sebastian today. He apologized. Sort of. And I realized I don't hate him anymore. I don't feel anything for him at all. Elena leaned against Miguel's shoulder. He did me a favor, really. If he'd accepted me, I'd be stuck in a loveless marriage of convenience living in the village, probably miserable. Instead, I'm here with you. Miguel pressed a kiss to her hair. Do you have any doubts? About Saturday. Elena thought about the question seriously. Did she doubt? There were still uncertainties, about whether she could truly handle the harsh mountain winters, about whether the villagers would ever fully accept her, about whether she'd be a good enough mother to children who'd already lost one. But beneath all that was a core of certainty that surprised her with its strength. No doubts, she said finally. Questions, maybe. Fears, certainly. But no doubts about this being right. Good. Miguel's arm tightened around her. Because I have enough fear for both of us. Fear that I'm not good enough for you. That you'll wake up one day and realize you gave up too much to be here. Miguel Andrade, you foolish man. Elena turned to face him fully. Don't you understand yet? I'm not giving up anything. I'm gaining everything that matters. A family, a purpose, a place to belong, and a partner who sees me for who I really am and loves me anyway. I do love you, Miguel said quietly. I've been afraid to say it too often, but I do, completely. I love you too, Elena whispered, the words coming more easily than she'd expected. Not the way I thought I'd love when I was young and romantic. This is steadier, deeper, like roots taking hold in good soil. Miguel kissed her then, gentle and thorough, and Elena felt those roots sink even deeper into the mountain earth that was becoming her home. 3 days later, Elena Morales would become Elena de Andrade. But in her heart, the transformation had already happened. She was already home. Saturday dawned clear and impossibly beautiful. Elena woke before sunrise in Teresa and Juan's house, where she'd stayed the night before according to tradition. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with anticipation and nerves. Teresa found her standing by the window, watching the sun paint the mountain peaks gold and rose. Nervous? Terrified, Elena admitted. Good, you should be terrified. Marriage is terrifying. You're binding your life to another person's, trusting them with your heart and your future. Teresa handed her a cup of herb tea. But if you're terrified with the right person, it becomes an adventure instead of a burden. Elena sipped the tea gratefully. Did you love Juan when you married him? Not the way the songs talk about love, but I respected him, and I could see his good heart. The love came later, built one day at a time. Teresa smiled. With you and Miguel, you're starting with both. That's rare. By mid-morning, the house was chaos. Lucia and Rosa arrived with wildflowers they'd gathered at dawn, violets and early mountain roses, and delicate white blooms Elena couldn't name. Teresa's sister came to help with Elena's hair, pinning it up with the flowers woven through. When Elena finally put on the wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly, she heard Lucia gasp. "Eleanor, you look beautiful." Eleanor studied herself in the small mirror. The dress was simple but elegant, the cream wool bringing out the warmth in her skin. The flowers in her dark hair softened the grey at her temples. She didn't look like a young bride, but she looked like herself, a woman who'd lived and lost and found the courage to hope again. "Will I do?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Papa's going to cry," Rosa announced with satisfaction. "He cries when he's happy now. He never used to." The small stone church in Navaredonda was packed when they arrived, more people than Elena had expected. Evidently, curiosity had overcome disapproval for many villagers. She spotted Señora Martinez beaming in the front row and Miguel's parents looking proud. Even some of the women who'd gossiped looked grudgingly approving at the sight of the bride, but Eleanor barely noticed any of them, because Miguel was standing at the altar in his best clothes, looking scrubbed and nervous and absolutely perfect. When their eyes met across the church, his face transformed with such joy that Elena felt her own eyes fill with tears. Diego walked her down the aisle. They'd decided on this together since Elena had no father, and Diego was so proud to play the role. The boy stood tall, taking his duty seriously, and Elena felt a surge of love for him. At the altar, Miguel took her hands. They were trembling slightly, and Elena realized he was as nervous as she was. Somehow that made everything easier. Father Tomas began the ceremony, his voice carrying through the church. Elena heard the familiar words as if from a distance, too focused on Miguel's face, on the way he looked at her like she was something precious and irreplaceable. When it came time for vows, Miguel spoke first. "Elena, I promise to be your partner in all things, to respect your mind and value your strength, to be worthy of the love you've given my children and the trust you've placed in me, to build a life with you that honors both what we've lost and what we've found, to choose you every day, in good times and hard times, until my last breath." Elena had to wipe her eyes before she could speak. "Miguel, I promise to love your children as my own, to be your equal partner in building this life we've chosen, to face whatever challenges come with courage and honesty, to remember that love is not just feeling but action, choosing each day to care for you and our family even when it's hard, to make this mountain my home and you my heart." There wasn't a dry eye in the church by the time Father Tomas pronounced them husband and wife. Miguel kissed her gently, reverently, and the congregation erupted in applause. The celebration that followed was held in the church courtyard, where tables had been set up with food and wine. It was simple fare, bread and cheese and roasted lamb, wine from the local vineyard, honey cakes that Rosa had helped Teresa make. But it was abundant and joyful, the spring sunshine warm on everyone's faces. Elena found herself passed from person to person, receiving congratulations and advice. Señora Martinez hugged her fiercely. "You've got a good man there. Treat him well, but don't let him get lazy. These mountain men need managing." Miguel's father pulled her aside with gruff affection. "Welcome to the family, daughter. We're proud to have you." Even some of the women who'd gossiped approached with tentative smiles, offering good wishes. Elena accepted them graciously, understanding that small communities needed time to adjust to change. The only sour note was Beatrice, who stood apart with a few friends, her face set in disapproving lines. At one point she approached Elena, her voice tight. "I hope you know what you're getting into, Senora. Mountain winters are brutal. This romantic notion you have of simple living will fade quickly when you're snowed in for months." Elena met her gaze calmly. "I don't have romantic notions, Beatrice. I have realistic expectations and determination." "That's enough. We'll see," Beatrice said coldly and walked away. Lucia appeared at Elena's elbow, having witnessed the exchange. "Don't let her ruin your day." "She can't," Elena assured her. "Nothing can ruin today." As afternoon faded to evening, musicians appeared, a guitar player and a man with a small drum. Soon the courtyard filled with music and dancing. Miguel, who claimed to be terrible at dancing, swept Elena into a simple waltz that had her laughing breathlessly. "See?" he murmured in her ear. "I told you I was bad at this." "You're perfect," Elena countered. "Absolutely perfect." As the sun set and candles were lit around the courtyard, Elena found herself surrounded by her new family. Lucia and Diego dancing together, Rosa asleep on Teresa's lap, Miguel's hand firm and warm in hers. This was her wedding night, the beginning of her married life, and it was nothing like she'd imagined when she was young. It was better, real and messy and filled with genuine love. Later, as they finally headed home, walking up the mountain path by lantern light with 3 sleepy children, Miguel pulled Elena close. "Happy, unbelievably happy," Elena answered honestly. "Scared too, but mostly happy." "Good scared or bad scared?" "Good scared. The kind that means you're about to start something important." Elena looked up at the stars brilliant overhead, at the dark shapes of the mountains that were her home now. "I keep thinking about what you said, about how Carmen was perfect for you when you were young, and I'm perfect for you now. I think the same is true for me. Antonio was perfect for my youth. You're perfect for the woman I've become." Miguel stopped walking and kissed her thoroughly, making the children giggle. "We're going to have a good life, Elena de Andrade." "The best life," Elena agreed. When they reached the house, it was transformed. Someone, probably Teresa and her sisters, had left wildflowers everywhere and lit candles in the windows. The children were settled quickly, and for the first time, Elena and Miguel were alone as husband and wife. They sat by the fire, hands clasped, not quite sure what to say. So much had changed. So much had led to this moment. Elena thought about the long journey from Barcelona, the cruel rejection, the desperate night on the church steps. If someone had told her then that within months she'd be married to a shepherd and happier than she'd ever been, she never would have believed it. "What are you thinking?" Miguel asked softly. "That rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me," Elena said. "That every hard thing I've endured led me exactly where I needed to be. That I'm grateful for all of it, even the painful parts, because they brought me to you." Miguel pulled her close, and Elena rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Tomorrow, she would wake up as a wife and mother. Tomorrow, she would face the realities of her new life. But tonight, wrapped in her husband's arms with the fire crackling and the mountain night quiet around them, Elena Morales, now Elena de Andrade, was simply, perfectly content. The mountain bride had found her home. The first weeks of marriage unfolded with surprising ease. Elena settled into her role as wife and mother with a naturalness that surprised even herself, but she knew the real tests were coming. Mountain life had been manageable in the gentle spring weather. Summer and the brutal winter ahead would be different. The first challenge came in June. Miguel had to take the sheep to the high summer pastures, a journey that would keep him away for 3 days. Elena insisted she could manage the children and the house alone, but privately she was nervous. What if something went wrong? What if one of the children got hurt or the weather turned bad, or she simply couldn't handle it all? "You'll be fine," Miguel assured her the morning he left, though his own face showed concern. "Lucia knows what to do. And if there's any real emergency, go to the neighbors." The neighbors were another shepherd family, the Romeros, who lived about an hour's walk away. Elena had met them once briefly at the wedding. "I'll be fine," Elena echoed, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "We'll be fine." Miguel kissed her, then each of the children, and set off with the flock and his dogs. Helena watched until he disappeared over the ridge, then turned to face 3 pairs of eyes watching her, with varying degrees of concern. "Right," she said briskly, channeling every ounce of determination she possessed. "We have work to do. Lucia, Show me again how your papa likes the cheese prepared. Diego, the chickens need tending. Rosa, you're in charge of collecting eggs. The first day passed smoothly enough. They fell into a rhythm, chores, lessons, meals, bedtime. But the second night brought rain and with it disaster. Elena woke to water dripping on her face. The roof was leaking. She lit a candle and discovered water pouring in through multiple spots in the ceiling. Within minutes, the children were awake, scared and cold as rain soaked through their blankets. "What do we do?" Diego asked, looking to Elena with frightening trust. Elena's mind raced. She'd seen Miguel patch the roof before, but she'd never done it herself. And in the dark, in a rainstorm with water pouring in. Impossible. They needed a different solution. "We move," she decided. "Bring your blankets to the main room. We'll sleep by the fire tonight. In the morning, when the rain stops, we'll fix it." They huddled together in the main room, which thankfully stayed mostly dry. Rosa was crying softly, frightened by the storm and missing her father. Elena held her close, singing quietly. An old lullaby Antonio used to sing to her. "Mama used to sing that," Lucia said softly from where she lay beside Diego. "Did she?" "Yes. When we were scared. It always helped." Lucia's voice was wistful. "You sound different than her, but it still helps." By morning, the rain had stopped. Elena, exhausted from a sleepless night, assessed the damage. The roof over the sleeping area was in bad shape. Several tiles had slipped, letting water pour through. She had no idea how to fix it properly. "Diego," she said decisively, "you're coming with me to the Romeros. We need help." The walk took longer with Diego along, but Elena was grateful for his company. Senora Romero, a practical woman with 5 children of her own, took one look at Elena's face and understood immediately. "Roof trouble? Several leaks. I don't know how to fix it properly. My oldest son can help. He's good with repairs." Senora Romero called for her teenage son, Vicente, who agreed readily. "Happens all the time after spring rains? The tiles shift? Don't worry, it's an easy fix if you know what you're doing." Vicente spent the afternoon on the roof, while Elena and the children passed him tiles and tools. He was patient, explaining what he was doing so Elena could learn. By evening, the roof was secure again. "Thank you," Elena said, meaning it from the bottom of her heart. "I don't know what I would have done without help." "That's what neighbors are for," Senora Romero said practically. "Next time you need help, just ask. And when we need help, we'll come to you. That's how we survive up here." When Miguel returned the following day, tired and sunburned from 3 days in the high pastures, he found his household in order, the roof repaired, and Elena calm despite her exhaustion. "There was trouble with the roof," Lucia reported before Elena could downplay it. "It leaked everywhere, but Elena got help from the Romeros, and Vicente fixed it, and we all slept by the fire, and Elena sang to us like Mama used to, and everything was okay." Miguel looked at Elena with new respect and something deeper, pride. "You handled it." "I asked for help," Elena corrected. "That's different than handling it alone." "That's exactly what handling it means," Miguel said seriously. "Knowing when you need help and being brave enough to ask for it. Carmen would have done the same." The comparison to Carmen, offered as a compliment, made Elena's eyes sting with tears. She was finding her place in this family, not by replacing Carmen, but by becoming her own kind of mother and wife. Different, but equally valid. The second test came in July, during a fierce heat wave. One of the sheep became severely ill, and Miguel was distraught. "I need to get the veterinarian from the village, but I can't leave the flock alone. Wolves have been spotted nearby." "I'll go," Elena offered immediately. "It's a 3-hour walk each way in this heat. I'll take Diego with me. We'll be fine." So Elena and Diego set off in the early morning, before the worst heat of the day. Elena carried water and food, determined to prove she could handle the physical demands of mountain life. The path was steep and rocky, and by the time they reached the village, Elena's feet were blistered and her body ached. But she'd done it. The veterinarian was out, but his assistant agreed to come back with them. The return journey was even harder. The sun was high now, the heat oppressive. Diego, tough as mountain children were, began to flag. "Tell me about Barcelona," he said, clearly trying to distract himself from the discomfort. "Tell me about the ocean." So Elena told stories as they climbed, painting pictures of ships and waves and the bustling port where Antonio had worked. The veterinarian's assistant, a young man named Javier, listened with interest. "You gave up city life for this?" he asked, gesturing to the harsh landscape around them. "I found something better than city life," Elena replied, smiling at Diego, who walked bravely beside her despite his exhaustion. "I found purpose, family, a place where I matter. By the time they reached the house, Elena was ready to collapse. But the sheep needed attention, and she stood beside Miguel as Javier examined the animal, asking questions and learning. The veterinarian's assistant was impressed by her genuine interest. "Most city women wouldn't last a week up here," he commented as he prepared to leave. "You're stronger than you look, Senora." After he left, Miguel found Elena sitting outside, soaking her blistered feet in cold water from the stream. He knelt beside her, his face filled with concern and admiration. "You walked 6 hours in the heat to save one sheep." "It's our livelihood," Elena said simply, "and you couldn't leave the flock. So I went." Miguel took her foot gently, examining the blisters. "You're bleeding. I'll heal. The sheep will too, thanks to Javier's medicine." "Elena," Miguel's voice was thick with emotion, "do you know what you've proven these past weeks? That you belong here, that you're not a city woman playing at mountain life. You are a mountain woman now. You've earned that." Elena looked at her rough, calloused hands, so different from the soft seamstress hands she'd had in Barcelona. She thought about the blisters, the exhaustion, the constant hard work, and she thought about the satisfaction of meeting each challenge, of growing stronger, of proving to herself that she could handle this life. "I had to prove it to myself more than anyone else," she admitted. "I needed to know I wouldn't fail when things got hard. And now you know," Miguel said softly. "You won't fail, you can't. You're too stubborn." Elena laughed, despite her exhaustion. "Is that a compliment?" "The highest compliment I can give." Miguel kissed her forehead gently. "Now come inside. I'll make dinner tonight. You've done enough." As they walked back to the house, Elena leaning on Miguel's arm, she felt something settle deep in her bones. She'd passed the tests. She'd proven herself. The mountains had accepted her, and more importantly, she'd accepted the mountains. This was her life now, hard and beautiful and real, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. That night, after the children were asleep and Miguel had bandaged her feet with surprising gentleness, Elena sat by the fire feeling deeply content. The summer stretched ahead, and after that, her first mountain winter. There would be more challenges, more tests, more moments of doubt, but she would face them all, because she was Elena de Andrade now, and she was exactly where she belonged. September arrived with the first hints of autumn color painting the mountain slopes. Elena had been married for 4 months, and the rhythm of her new life had become as natural as breathing. She woke before dawn to tend the fire, prepared breakfast while Miguel checked the animals, taught the children their lessons, managed the endless household tasks, and fell into bed each night bone-tired but satisfied. The changes in the children were remarkable. Diego read fluently now, devouring every book they could borrow from the village. Lucia had become an accomplished seamstress, selling her embroidery work at the market. Even little Rosa had grown more confident, no longer the frightened child who cried for her mother at night. But it was a letter that arrived one morning that brought Elena's journey full circle. Miguel had gone to the village for supplies and returned with his arms full of parcels and an envelope. "This came for you. From Barcelona." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she took it. The handwriting was familiar. Senora Flores, her old neighbor. She opened it carefully, aware of 3 pairs of curious eyes watching her. "My dear Elena, I hope this letter finds you well and happy in your mountain home. I write with news that I thought you should know. Don Sebastian Ruiz has been in Barcelona these past weeks, visiting fabric suppliers. He came to see me, asking about you. He wanted to know if I'd heard from you, if you were well. I told him you were very well indeed, married to a good man, mother to 3 children, happier than I'd ever seen you. He looked quite stricken by this news. Elena, he confessed to me that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd let his pride and foolish expectations blind him to your true worth. He said he'd been unable to find another woman who could match you in character or intelligence. He wanted your address, said he needed to apologize properly. I did not give it to him, of course. That chapter of your life is closed, but I thought you should know that he realizes what he lost. Small comfort, perhaps, but comfort nonetheless. Write to me when you can. Tell me about your new life. I miss you, child, but I'm so glad you found your happiness. With love, Senora Flores." Elena set down the letter slowly. Sebastian regretted rejecting her. The knowledge should have brought satisfaction, vindication. Instead, she felt only a distant pity. "What is it?" Miguel asked, concern in his voice. Elena handed him the letter. As he read, his expression darkened. "He wants to apologize? Now? After everything?" "It doesn't matter," Elena said, and realized she meant it completely. "Whatever he feels now changes nothing. I'm not the woman he rejected anymore. That woman died on those church steps. I'm someone new now, someone better. Lucia, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. Are you glad he rejected you? Eleanor considered the question seriously. Yes, she said finally. If he'd accepted me, I'd have a comfortable life in the village. But I wouldn't have you three, I wouldn't have your father. I wouldn't have learned how strong I really am, so yes, I'm grateful he rejected me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Can I read the letter to the little ones? Lucia asked, her eyes bright with something that looked like pride. Eleanor nodded, and Lucia read it aloud to Diego and Rosa, who listened with great interest. When she finished, Rosa announced firmly, "That man is stupid. You're the best mama in the world." "She's certainly the best mama we could have asked for," Miguel added, pulling Elena close. Later that day, while the children were outside playing, Elena sat down to write her response to Señora Flores. She described her life in detail: the house, the children, Miguel's kindness, the challenges she'd faced and overcome. She wrote about the leaking roof and the long walk to fetch the veterinarian. She wrote about teaching Diego to read and watching Lucia blossom into a young woman. She wrote about little Rosa's trust and affection. "I am not the same woman who left Barcelona," she wrote. "That woman was drowning in loneliness and desperation, willing to accept any port in the storm. This woman knows her worth. This woman has proven herself capable of far more than she ever imagined. This woman is loved not for what she might provide, but for who she truly is. Tell Don Sebastian, if you see him again, that I wish him well. Tell him I hope he finds what he's looking for. But tell him also that I found something infinitely better than what he offered. I found myself." She sealed the letter and gave it to Miguel to post on his next trip to the village. A week later, Elena was hanging laundry when she saw a familiar figure approaching up the mountain path. As he drew closer, her stomach tightened. Don Sebastian. He looked haggard, older than she remembered. His expensive clothes were dusty from travel, and his face showed lines of stress she hadn't noticed before. "Señora Morales, or should I say Señora de Andrade?" His voice was uncertain, nothing like the cold dismissal of their first encounter. Elena continued hanging laundry, forcing her hands to stay steady. "Don Sebastian, this is unexpected. I had to come, had to see you. Apologize properly." He stopped a few feet away, as if afraid to come closer. "Señora Flores said you were happy, but I had to see for myself. Had to tell you that I was wrong. Terribly, inexcusably wrong. You came all the way from Barcelona to tell me that? I couldn't live with myself otherwise." Sebastian's voice cracked slightly. "I rejected you for the most superficial, stupid reasons. I let myself be governed by pride and foolish expectations, and I've regretted it every day since." Elena set down the laundry and turned to face him fully. "What exactly do you regret, Don Sebastian? Rejecting me, or losing the chance at what I could have provided?" He flinched at the question. "Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. I only know that I haven't been able to find another woman who could match your intelligence, your character, your strength. I've courted a dozen young girls since you left, and they're all," he gestured helplessly, "empty, vapid, nothing like you. So you came here to what? Ask me to leave my husband and children? To come back to the village with you?" Elena's voice was calm but firm. "No, I mean, I don't know what I expected. I just needed you to know that I was wrong about you, that you were everything I should have wanted, that I'm sorry." Miguel appeared around the corner of the house, Diego at his side. He sized up the situation immediately, his expression hardening. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Elena said steadily. "Don Sebastian was just leaving. He came to apologize for past wrongs, and I accept his apology, but that's all there is between us. Past wrongs and an apology. Nothing more." Sebastian looked at Miguel, at his weathered, honest face and work-roughened hands, then at the simple house and the life Elena had chosen. "This is what you wanted? This is what you chose over me?" "No," Elena corrected gently. "I didn't choose this over you. You rejected me, remember? But yes, this is what I would choose every single time. This real, honest life with a man who values me for who I am. These children who need me and love me. This hard work that makes me stronger every day. You're right about one thing. I am strong. But I didn't discover that strength in your comfortable shop or your pretty promises. I discovered it here, when I had nothing and had to rebuild everything from scratch." Sebastian's face showed dawning understanding and something that looked like genuine grief. "I really have lost you." "You never had me to lose," Elena said, not unkindly. "You had a fantasy based on letters. I was never the woman you imagined, just as you were never the man I hoped for. We both made that mistake together. But he's a shepherd, Sebastian said, gesturing to Miguel with something like desperation. I could have given you so much more. He gave me everything that matters, Elena replied simply. Now please go. You've had your apology. Let it be enough. Sebastian looked like he wanted to say more, but Miguel stepped forward, his presence solid and unmistakably protective. You heard my wife. Time for you to leave. After a long moment, Sebastian nodded. He turned to go, then looked back once more. For what it's worth, Señora de Andrade, I think you made the right choice, even if I wish you'd made a different one. They watched him walk back down the mountain path until he disappeared around a bend. Only then did Elena let out the breath she'd been holding. Miguel pulled her close, and Elena relaxed into his embrace. Are you all right? He asked softly. I'm perfect, Elena said, and meant it completely. He was my past, a painful, humiliating past. But you and the children are my present and future. There's no comparison. Diego, who'd been watching quietly, tugged on Elena's skirt. Mama, are you really glad he didn't want you? Elena knelt down to Diego's level, taking his hands in hers. I'm grateful for everything that brought me to this family. Every hard thing, every painful moment, every rejection. Because they all led me exactly where I needed to be. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Elena looked around the table at the faces she loved. Lucia, growing into a confident young woman. Diego, eager and bright with curiosity. Little Rosa, chattering about her day. And Miguel, steady and true, meeting her eyes with love and understanding. This was not the life she'd imagined when she'd responded to that newspaper advertisement. It was harder, more challenging, demanding more of her than she'd known she could give, but it was also richer, more meaningful, more genuine than any fantasy could have been. Tell us about Barcelona again, Rosa pleaded as they finished eating. Tell us about the ocean and the big ships. Eleanor smiled and launched into a story, the children hanging on every word. But this time she wasn't telling stories to entertain or to escape. She was sharing her past with her present, weaving together the woman she'd been with the woman she'd become. As darkness fell and the children were tucked into bed, Elena and Miguel stood outside under the star-bright mountain sky. The first snow of autumn was predicted soon, and Elena found herself looking forward to her first full winter as part of this family. There would be challenges, certainly, harsh weather, isolation, the constant work of survival, but she would face them all with the strength she'd discovered in herself and the love of the family she'd found. Happy? Miguel asked, as he did most nights. Elena leaned into his warmth, breathing in the clear mountain air that was home now. Happier than I ever imagined possible, even after today, seeing Sebastian, especially after today, because it showed me how far I've come. The woman he rejected doesn't exist anymore. She's been transformed into someone stronger, braver, more certain of her worth. Elena turned to face her husband, touching his weathered cheek gently. You saved me, Miguel, not by rescuing me from those church steps, but by giving me the space and support to save myself. Miguel kissed her softly. We saved each other. I was drowning in grief and exhaustion. You brought me back to life. They stood together in the peaceful night, two broken people who'd become whole together, united by loss and made stronger by love. The mountain wind whispered through the valley, carrying the promise of winter and the certainty of spring beyond it. Elena Morales had left Barcelona searching for a new life. She'd been rejected, humiliated, left with nothing. But from that nothing, she'd built everything that mattered. A family who loved her, a home that welcomed her, a purpose that fulfilled her, and a strength she'd never known she possessed. The mountain bride had found her home, and in finding it, she'd found herself. As snow began to fall softly in the darkness, dusting the peaks with white promise, Elena smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments of growth. But tonight, wrapped in her husband's arms with her children sleeping peacefully inside, Elena de Andrade was exactly where she belonged. The journey from those cold church steps to this moment of perfect contentment had been hard and painful and transformative. But it had been worth every difficult step, because sometimes the worst rejection leads to the best discovery, not of another person, but of yourself. And that, Elena thought as she and Miguel turned to go inside, was the greatest gift of all.